Hey everybody, we're in the middle of a multi-part series on building an administrative database for monitoring other access databases. This is the roadmap I presented at the beginning of our series. Along the left side, we were going to provide some functionality from built-in Microsoft functionality, and along the right side, we're going to provide the same functionality using a custom solution. Along the left, in parts 1 and 2, we use the Jet user roster to count and identify users of the other databases that we want to monitor. And in part 3, we use the Jet connection control to prevent users from logging in so that we can perform maintenance functions. In part 4, we used a custom solution to count and identify users of the databases that we want to monitor. In part 5, I had planned to use a custom solution to prevent users from logging in. However, after evaluating the solution that I came up with, I decided that the Jet connection control provided better functionality. So we'll be skipping that topic and moving on to forcing our users of our monitor databases to log out so that we can perform maintenance functions. Hey everybody, this is Ray Harvey for Access Jitsu. Thanks for joining us for part 5 in our series on building an administrative database for monitoring other access databases. In this video we'll cover how to force users to log out of the databases that we're monitoring so that we can perform maintenance on them. So let's take a bird's eye view of our approach. Over here on the left we have an administrative database that is responsible for monitoring these databases. These are split databases. Okay. Over here on the right are our users and our users' desktops that have the user interface on a front-end database. And these drums represent the back-end databases that are on our network shares. In order to force these users to log out of their databases even though we're not logged into them or in control of them, we're going to need to shift some responsibility to these databases. And we'll start doing this by adding a table and a query to these back-end databases. Remember, these are the only databases we can get to. We cannot get to the user's desktops from our admin database. It can only get to the network drives, which holds the back-end databases. So we're going to put a table in the back-end database of each monitor database, and that table is going to hold a single row and a single true-false or yes-no column. And a true value in that column will represent yes, we want the users to log out as soon as possible. A false value will mean that they can stay logged in and continue doing their work. We will also add a query to these back-end databases. The responsibility of the query will be to set the value in that table to true or false. And the way this will work is the administrative database will establish an ODBC connection to this back-end database and execute that query, passing it either true or false. Whether we want to force users out, or false, we can want to let them back in again. Then we're going to add to each of these front-end databases 2 forms. One of these forms we've already seen in a previous video, and that's a hidden form. We're going to add to this form now a timer event, and when the timer event fires, it is going to query this new table and check on that value. If that value is true, it's going to open this second new form, which is our logout form. And for the purposes of this demonstration, that logout form will simply display on the screen and say you're going to be forcibly logged out so the admin can perform some maintenance, and give them a 10-second countdown and then shut down the application. Now in the real world, I think I would give them a little more warning than that. I think I would have a 2-stage process. Perhaps open the form one time and say you have a minute to save your work, hurry up and get out, and then have that form open a second time and then give them a 10 or 15-second countdown before logging them out. Okay, let's take a look at one of the backends that we'll be monitoring. We've added 2 items. First, we've added a new table. I've called it Access Control, and it has 2 columns in it. Our primary key, what I've called Record ID, is an auto number column, and the Force Logout column, which is a Boolean or a yes-no column. Let's take a look at this table in Datasheet view. You see I only had a single row. That's all we need, because it just needs to tell us if we want to log people out of this database. Close that guy. The other item we've added is the query that our admin database is going to interact with in order to set that force logout column in the table we just looked at. It is an update query, and it takes a parameter as input. Okay, so we have a parameter statement at the beginning to take care of that parameter. Parameters. Force logout in is what I've called it, and it needs a Boolean value as input, and when we're dealing with parameters we call that a bit. An important point here, make sure that your input parameter does not have the same name as your query. When you attempt to execute that from the other database, it will not work if they are the same. That's why I have force logout in as the name of my parameter on this query. The statement is very simple. Update the table name access control. Set the force logout column equal to the value of the parameter that's passed in. Okay, let's take a look at our administrative database now. We have two forms to look at in this database. Form monitored databases is the form that we were using to keep track of the databases that we want to monitor. I have two rows in it, or two databases in here at the moment. I have added this column right here, force logout query. This records the name of the query in the back end that we need to execute to force users to log out. And notice here that each of these databases has a different name of the query. That's why we're recording it, so that we have that sort of flexibility. Close this guy and head over to the other form, and that is form.admin. I have added a column to this subform. It's in datasheet view here, calling it forcing out. And this is going to display a yes or no when we have clicked the force users to log out button down here, so that we can keep track of which databases we're forcing people out of and which we aren't. The way this works is we'll click the row, the database we want to lock, and click logout. And then what we get here is we lock the database to prevent other users from logging in, and then a yes here in this column to show us that we are trying to force the users that are already in there out. So let's take a look at the code behind this logout users button. There we go. On click event, takes us to here. We're going to back up just a tiny bit. Well, here's the click event for that button, and it's going to call a custom method we built just for this, force logout. We're going to pass it a value of true. And the reason I'm doing that is I want this method to do both a lock and an unlock. And the reason I want to do an unlock is we have that unlock button just to the left. That is this guy right here. So when this code already existed, it unlocks the database for future users, and then we want to call force logout with a false here to tell force logout to unlock that database and let everybody back in. Let's run down here and take a look at force logout. Here we go. So here's our input parameter, force out. We've dimensioned some variables we're going to use at the beginning. The first thing we do is we query the monitored databases table to obtain the information we need for interacting with the database. We need a path so we can find it. Status tells us if the database is already locked or not. The force logout query is the name of the query we're going to execute in order to tell that database to force its users out. And logging out is this column right here. Then we're going to put the yes or the space in to show us that we're forcing people out. We're going to load that into a record set, data record set. We will test the record count to see if we have anything to work with, and if we do, first we're going to check to see if we're trying to force people out. And if we are, and it's true, we're going to check the status to see if the database is already locked. If it's not already locked, we want to lock it. This is code we wrote in video 4. It uses the jet connection control to lock the database. Next, we need to find the connection object that we have in an array of connection objects. Again, we built this code in video 4 as well. We feed it the path as input, and it returns a number, which represents the occurrence in the array of the connection we need to work with. If it returns a -1, that means we could not find the connection object. And if that's the case, we want to give our users a message box that we have a problem, and then get out. Next, we want to check to see if we did indeed get a value back in the force logout query column, meaning we want to make sure we have a query name to work with, and if we do, we need to build our command. So make our active connection the connection object that we returned from our function call up here. So then we start building a command. We set the command type equal to add command stored prop. This tells Access it's going to be executing a query or a stored procedure. In this case, it'll be a query in the other Access database. We set the command text to the name of the query or stored procedure that we want to run, and that's coming from the record set we just filled from the query just above. And this query is expecting an input parameter. Okay, so we need to create a parameter, and we're going to add it to our command. So we have command.createParameter. It's going to be of Boolean type, yes, no, or true, false, and it is an input parameter. And we're going to set the param, which is a parameter object, equal to all that. We're going to set the parameter value equal to whatever we pulled in as our input variable here, our input parameter, force out. And then we're going to append that parameter to this command objects parameters collection, and then we're going to execute the command. So we're going to execute that query. That then will set the value, either true or false, that we've fed it in the other database, the monitored database. Then we want to update our user interface in this database to show either yes, we're forcing people out, or no, we're not. So we're going to put that record set that we created right above here. I'm going to put this record set in edit mode right here. If the force out variable equals true, we're going to set that column, that logging out column, equal to the word yes. If it's false, we're going to set it equal to a zero-length string. And we're going to update the record set and then update our display. Next, let's take a look at the front end for that same database. So I have our hidden form, which we built in a previous video. Here in design view, let's pull up the properties sheet and look at what I added here. We have added a timer event. I've got it set to fire every 10 seconds. Let's take a look at that code. Not much to this code. When this timer event fires, we're going to query the access control table in the database's backend to obtain a force logout columns value to see if the admin database has told us to log our users out of this database. We use the open record set method to open a snapshot, load it into RS, which is a DAO record set. We'll check to see if we have any records back. Record count not equal to 0, and if we do, we're going to check to see if the force logout value is true. If it is, we're going to open our form, which is going to take care of the logging out for us. That's form force logout in my case here. If force logout value is false from the table, then we're going to check to see if our form force logout is open, and if it is, we're going to close it. Now we have some error code down here. Notice I've got an on error, go to sub error. Here's our sub error label. I'm checking for a specific error code here, 3734. The reason I'm doing this is when we click the button in our admin database to force users to log out, the first thing that code is going to do is it's going to lock our backend database to prevent other users from logging in. So if this front end, even though it's open, doesn't have or hasn't established a connection with one of the tables in the back end, this front end really isn't logged into that back end, and we will not be able to query this table because we'll have already been logged out. And 3734 is the error we'll get when that happens. So if we get this error, what we're going to do is pop up a different form for them, and it's going to, we've called it form don't log in, and this is going to be a form that shows, or it says, tells them you can't log in right now because the backend database has already been locked for future use. Let's head back over to the forms in this same front end. Let's take a look at our form force logout. This is the form that's going to open when we want to force the users to log out. Not much here. We have a label up here informing the user that we need to log you out. We have another label down here where we're going to show them a timer. Okay, so let's take a look at the code behind this guy. Here, form force logout. Here we go. Again, very small amount of code here. Let's get this out of the way. When this form opens, we're going to set an integer variable equal to 10, and that's going to be the number of seconds we want this form to count down from before it forcefully logs our users out. We had the form timer on that form set to 10 seconds, and every time the form timer fires, we're going to decrement time remaining by 1 second. Okay, we're going to set our label caption equal to you'll be logged out in X number of seconds. That's the time remaining value. When our time remaining gets down to 0, we're going to issue the, when our time remaining gets down to 0, we're going to execute the application.quit method and close this database entirely. And like I said, I think earlier in the video, if this were a real production database, I think I would have a two-step process going here. You need some more variables to do it, but give them maybe a minute warning and let them close the form at that point if they want to, but then when 10 seconds remain, pop it back up and then give them that 10-second countdown. Okay, let's have a quick demonstration. Over here I have the split example 1 front end opened, and I want you to notice that I have nothing on the screen that has established a connection to its backend database. Okay, these tables have not been opened. I have no form opened that connects with these tables. So the backend database is in a closed state at the moment. Okay, there's no connection between the front end and the back end. Okay, let's come over here and select split example 1. You can see I'm logged in here, and click log out all users of database. And then we're going to watch over here to see what happens in our front end of our monitored database. Okay, there we go. This is the form that we opened in our error handler. Okay. The first thing this code did was it used the jet connection control to lock this database, this back end, to prevent future connections. So when this database tried to query its back end, it couldn't even query the back end because that back end had been locked for future users. Okay. Let's come back over here. Let's unlock this guy. Come back over here and let's open a table. We're going to establish a connection to our back end. Okay, so this guy is already in it. Now let's come over here and click Logout. Come back over here and watch what happens. Now we get you're going to be logged out in 8 seconds because this database already had a connection. Even though we tried to prevent users from logging in, we were already logged in here. And we got down to 1 second and application quit, closes the database. Now we also use the jet connection control to lock that database. So if I double click on it over here on my other screen and try to open that front end again, what you get is that same message before. The front end will open, but it will not establish a connection to its back end. Okay, so we can't really get in. We're not really in. So that's it for our video on how to use an administrative database to force users of your monitor databases to log out, even though they don't want to log out, so that you can perform your maintenance on their databases. I hope you got something out of this video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.